President Trump does not want members of Congress to look at his tax returns. I mean, we know that for certain because ever since he became president, and even beforehand, he wanted to make sure that nobody saw his tax returns, saying ridiculous things like, oh no, I've been under audit for the last 3-4 years, something like that. Man, under audit, you can't look at it. I'd love to show you, but I just can't. I'm under audit. What are you going to do? You're just going to have to take my word for it that my tax returns are fantastic and tremendous. That is one hell of an audit, by the way. 4 years. Now, the other reason for avoiding tax disclosure law is that he claims that, well, it's the Democrats. They're asking for my taxes. Nobody's ever done that before. That is unprecedented in American history, that you will try to get a president's tax returns. I mean, that's crazy. We've never seen it. Turns out, no, that's not true at all. Democrats in the House of Representatives have actually released historical documents. I know, you would have to read them, and we know Donald Trump doesn't read. But these historical documents show that there is a precedent for releasing tax returns for presidents. Now, what do we call something that's not true? Well, I mean, you can call it false, right? Or you can call it a lie. It's the same thing, right? So what Donald Trump says, it's unprecedented. It is false. Therefore, he is lying. Of course. Now, let me give you the historical context here, right? So, in the early 1970s, the Joint Committee on Taxation used the same tax disclosure law to obtain information related to then President Richard Nixon. Now, Richard Nixon shares a lot of similarities to Donald Trump. Even so, even Tricky Dick had a notable difference to Donald Trump. You see, amid a controversy over questionable deductions, according to HuffPost, he'd used to lower his tax bill. In 1973, Richard Nixon publicly asked the Joint Committee, which is a nonpartisan panel of tax policy experts, to pour over 4 years of his returns to verify that he indeed paid what he owed. Because I guess even back then, you might be a criminal, you might be a terrible person, but at least if you're a Republican, you believed in paying your taxes. Richard Nixon actually cared more about that than Donald Trump does. So now Nixon said, okay, you want to look at my taxes? Go ahead. Go ahead. Now, the difference is, of course, Donald Trump says, no, you don't need to look at my taxes. No, you stay away from that, from my taxes. If you try to even look at them, it's unprecedented. You're just going to have to take my word for it. They're the best tax returns ever. Now, of course, that wasn't enough for congressional investigators, and good thing, too, right? So they pushed for more documentation, more taxes, right? Now, the House Ways and Means Committee on Thursday revealed old letters between the between the Joint Committee on Taxation and the Internal Revenue Service. And it showed that the Joint Tax Committee had asked for more information on Nixon, including for returns prior to the ones that Nixon had volunteered. The IRS provided those returns the same day. Oh, you need those returns? Sure thing. Got them right here. Here you go. Now, this is Committee Chair Richard Neal, right? Now, he had a statement on this, right? After they dug up these old documents and said, hey, look, it turns out we do have a precedent. He said this in a statement, quote, these included tax years prior to those released by President Nixon, as well as the return for family members. It is noted that in the materials that these returns were necessary because they related to later tax years. This is precisely why we requested returns prior to 2017 for President Trump. Now, Ways and Means, the Joint Committee on Taxation, and the Senate Finance Committee are the three congressional committees that are supposed to be able to look at any tax return that they want, including the president's. Congress itself, has the power and gave itself the power back in 1924. Now, the reason, of course, is they wanted to make sure that they had a check on the executive branch. And so any of those committees, in order to get access to these taxes, all they have to do is say, we would like access to these taxes. And the IRS is supposed to say, okay, yep, that is part of your power and your check on the executive branch. Now, the problem is we have an IRS that will not do that. Now, earlier this year, Neil had asked for copies of 6 years' worth of Donald Trump's personal and business tax returns, plus documents related to any audits for those years. But Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, who oversees the IRS and is a Trump lackey, said that complying with this so-called unprecedented request could have terrible consequences. Terrible. Oh, really? Well, I guess maybe if you're somebody whose name happens to rhyme with Tronald Dump, I don't know. Somebody, sees some possible terrible consequences. Come on, we all know why. We know. History demonstrates that private tax return information, this is Mnuchin talking here, is susceptible to abuse for partisan purposes regardless of which party is in power. Now, that is severe projection. Because, look, if there were any sort of questions about a Democratic president having some, straight up weird shenanigans in their tax returns, who do you think would be calling for those? Immediately. Republicans in Congress. Now, Mnuchin said that in an April 23rd letter, and he also said, unless carefully restrained by law, this risk threatens the privacy of all taxpayers. Again, this is precedent. Since the 1920s, Congress has been able to ask for tax returns so that they can go and review and make sure that, of course, whoever's, taxes are being audited, et cetera, or looked at, is complying with federal tax law. But see, here's the thing. Again, Mnuchin is there strictly to cover for Donald Trump. And so he knows that, look, Donald Trump doesn't want us to look at his taxes. I think there might be a reason why. So we're just going to stall, and we're going to make sure that the president does not get any sort of check from Congress. And so here's the thing as well. What is in those taxes that is stopping Donald Trump from being able to share it? Well, again, we don't know, but we could definitely speculate. And to do that, let's go and get some historical context again from Richard Nixon. Now, the committee reported that Nixon had used bogus deductions to reduce his taxable income, ultimately dodging about $477,431 worth of taxes, according to the Joint Committee's recent summary of the episode. The IRS had conducted a parallel review, and Nixon wound up paying money that he owed into the federal government. So the reason that I reference that is that Nixon used some deductions to reduce his taxable income, of course, right? And ended up paying a lot of money. Again, this was back in the 1960s. $477,000 is, a large amount of money. So now we go to Donald Trump. Now, here's the thing. Is Donald Trump does he enjoy dodging taxes? Yes, he actually does. In recent leaked tax filings, Donald Trump has been accused of inflating his assets in order to get loans from Deutsche Bank. And then, afterwards, had deflated his assets in order to avoid paying extra tax on that money. Now, I'm no tax expert, but that looks like fraud. Oh, no, my company's worth a lot of money. That's why you should give me a loan, because I have a lot of assets to be able to pay it back. But then when it comes time to, pay your taxes, oh, no, oh, God, I look at my assets. They're so terrible. It looks like I'm just going to have to pay so much less because my assets are terrible. Oh, which one is it? Are you a brilliant businessman? Makes lots and lots of money and therefore, of course, owes proportional taxes to his wealth? Or do you suck at business and therefore need to have pity on people pity on you at the IRS. Oh, please don't tax me so much. What is it? What is it? Well, again, speculation, but I'm pretty sure I know the answer. He's all in for saving as much money as possible. And of course, Republicans look at that and say, well, of course. That's why Donald Trump's an absolute genius. He lies to the federal government and he withholds, money that could go to the common good. Well, of course, wouldn't you do that? I mean, I'd do that because I hate paying taxes. And I want to make sure to starve the government of revenue that they need. I'm a great businessman. If Congress is able to look at Trump's taxes, I think at the very least they would find evidence of tax fraud. And that's the overall thing, right? And if you think Donald Trump wouldn't do it, again, no. He absolutely would do it. And if you say, oh, no, yeah, Donald Trump would never do anything like tax fraud to make sure that he pays less than what he owes and saves money. Well, if you're saying that, then you don't know Donald Trump. I mean, again, he's incredibly cheap because he's not a billionaire. Not a billionaire. And those returns, here's another thing. Those returns would likely prove that he is not as rich as he claims. I'm also guessing that he has a lot of debt. Because again, you have to look at some of the leaked taxes that we've already seen. And, that leak had about 10 years worth of Trump's tax returns. And he lost $10 billion. This guy is a serial loser. An absolute fraud of a businessman and just absolutely terrible at anything related to finance. He also has a history of taking out junk loans with super high interest rates and then, of course, declaring bankruptcy when it all blows up in his face. All of these reasons and possibly more are why he continues to lie and have Mnuchin, his crony, his stooge, continue to cover up his tax returns. But as you can see, there is precedent for Congress asking for tax returns. They have the power to do so, and they have the right to do so. And so his excuse is, they just can't, and it's unprecedented, and I'm being audited, are complete and utter BS. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a patreon.com/TYTNation set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.